Mysterious things grow in the desert. To thrive in the most barren landscape the world has to offer, a living thing has to have twisted qualities, which border on abnormalities. Kelso Valley stretches over 100 miles of land in the high Sierras, useless for cultivation. The mountain paths are steep, unforgiving, and seem to touch the base of the sun in the summertime. The road is seldom traveled, so hardly visible. If someone crosses the valley, the wind and the sand simply wash their road away, as if to say, no one is meant to walk here. This is the white space of the world God left blank and unforgiving. And it's a place we found my sister, Helen. Throughout my childhood, my parents were government-hired horse catchers. In the summer, during the day, they left my brother Russ and I at an abandoned army base close to the center of Kelso Valley. They rode out to check their traps and left us work to do, but we always played. Russ liked playing trapper with bunny hides our father gave us, but the untreated skin quickly became rancid in the heat. The army base sat halfway up the foothill before the deep span of Kelso Valley and its gradual slope into the opposite mountains. I could see my parents riding towards us from 20 miles away, and used to pretend they were coming to rescue me from a lonely island or a forgotten castle. One evening, as the setting sun was turning the desert sky to violet, I saw my parents riding in. They were riding slower than usual. Dad was usually hungry, so he brought the horses back at a frantic gallop that woke up all the dusting camp. As they got closer, I saw my mother was holding something in her arms. Doc and Red River were getting antsy in their corral, because they knew it was time to ride home for dinner. I wanted to get home too. Russ had been in a bad mood and we had fought during the day. When my parents were in yelling distance, my father shouted, "Evelyn, come here." I ran to him as fast as I could. My father never gave me a job. When I reached him, my calves ached and my heartbeat shook my chest. My mother moved her horse, Chet, next to me, so I could feel the heat radiating from his sweat-soaked coat. "Take this, Evelyn." She handed me a bundle she was holding, and I received Helen in my 6-year-old arms. My mother dismounted and led her horse to the water trough, and my father yelled at Russ to tack up our horses. I could tell something was terribly wrong. My father stopped shouting to bend behind the aluminum shed to be sick, but I was more concerned about my mother. Her eyes were neutral. I could seldom pinpoint an emotion in her face. It was the way she gripped the side of the water trough that told me something was wrong. Her knuckles were white from the hold she had on the metal lip. I was left alone, standing at the base of camp with a baby in my arms in the darkening expanse of Kelso Valley behind me. I looked down at her dirty body wrapped up in a saddle pad, and her blue eyes looked back at me. I never wanted to let her go. I couldn't bring myself to ask my parents where she had come from, or if she were mine. The ride home to Onyx was slow and confusing. My mother held the then nameless Helen in her arms, and my father kept his horse, Duke, at a walk ahead of us. My mother tried multiple times to catch up to my father, but he kicked his horse on, avoiding her. "Dawn," my mother called from her horse, "we need to go to the sheriff." "Shut up," my father replied. "That baby's yours." My mother didn't answer. She held the desert's baby in her arms and tried to think of an excuse for why Helen was hers to name. When we got home, it was late. My brother and I were sent directly to bed after tending to our horses and having something to eat, but I tried to stay awake. My father was yelling, "It's not our business to get into, Marilyn. What about the body? It won't be there in the morning." I could tell by the tone of my father's voice that his mind wasn't going to be changed by my mother, and it was the only argument I remember hoping he would win. She was probably a hate-crazed new mother who walked too close to the sun. I heard him slam a door. My mother was silent. The next Sunday, my mother held the baby named Helen in her arms as we walked into a different church on the opposite shore of the lake. She was greeted with warm smiles and congratulations. My mother had no friends and no one close enough to know she hadn't been pregnant. She lived hidden by the wall my father built around her and was known as nothing more than Donald McGrath's beautiful wife. Russ and I attended Sunday school. Not being in the nave with Helen made me nervous. I didn't pay attention to our teacher and got scolded for not reciting Bible verses. At the end of the service, the minister came to pray with the children, and then he dismissed them to their parents. I was hurrying to see Helen and tried to push my way through the door, but someone caught my arm. I turned to see it was the minister holding me in place. Sweat made his dark hair cling to his red complexion. "Sweetheart, where did your mother get her baby?" "She's my baby," I answered and pulled my arm from his grip. From then on, Helen was not only my sister, she was my baby. But she was not like other babies. Helen never cried or fussed. She stayed wherever she was placed and never seemed to show any affinity. She came with us to camp every day, and was my responsibility, but she didn't require much apart from her needs. Russ didn't like her. He thought she was boring and a waste of space. I loved her anything more than I knew or had, and I was scared for her. Scared that a real mom would come find her and take her from me, so I hid her during the day. To make myself feel better, I told Helen the desert was her mom, and that she had never left her real mama's arms, and never would. Neither would I. There are two sides to the High Sierras, the beauty and the fire. The Golden Mountains take on a unique beauty for every season and time of day. I never get tired of staring into the sunlit wasteland. The fires are said to be natural, but to witness one is to witness hell on earth. They blacken mountains, curl trees, and send the few creatures that find refuge in the cliffs, fleeing for their lives. The fires are God's reminder not to inhabit what is intended to be left blank. Helen grew into a beautiful girl. 12 years later, I sat on the porch and watched Helen standing on the shore of the Lake Isabella Reservoir. Her hair was the same color as the prairie, gold and sunlit, and it rose and fell with the wind. Although she was beautiful, it was seldom someone engaged her. I myself never really talked to my sister beyond necessary conversation. Her eyes avoid mine when we speak, but she doesn't show discomfort or bitterness. She's strikingly neutral in her replies and never seeks further conversation. But I do love her. The year Helen turned 12, the fires started. A serial arsonist awoke in Kern County. In the summer season, regular fires were started by backyard cookouts and discarded cigarettes, but in the year 1966, fires seemed to be catching all over the place. Some were stifled in the small hours after their birth, and others went on to destroy acres, homes, and lives. That year, Helen and I were seated at the airport diner in Kernville, waiting for my boyfriend Scott to come pick us up in his new car. They had a TV close to the cash register that always played the news. A fire had caught recently in the neighboring town of Bodfish. It had burned 8 homes and killed 12 horses. "Oh no," said Donna, the seemingly ageless owner of the airport. "Those are Ellison's quarter horses." "How terrible," I responded. Helen didn't watch the screen. She looked forward and twisted her milkshake straw between her fingers. Something new came into Helen's eyes that I had never witnessed before. The beauty had left her, and for the first time I saw the fire.